to exploring community justice help to advance community-based access to justice, an interactive session developed as part of Ontario's 5th Annual Access to Justice Week. Je m'appelle Teresa Donnelly, la trésorière de Barreau. C'est un plaisir de vous souhaiter la bienvenue aujourd'hui. I'm joining you today from my home in Huron County, Ontario. I would like to acknowledge that Huron County is located on the traditional lands of the Ojibwe Chippewa of the Anishinaabe group of Indigenous peoples. Huron County is on territory that is covered by Crown Treaty number 29, known as the Huron Tract Purchase of 1827. In July 2020, Community Legal Education Ontario, or CLEO, released a report, Community Justice Help, Advancing Community-Based Access to Justice, which calls for greater recognition and support for community organizations as pivotal to advancing access to justice for Ontarians. The report explains how community organizations play a critical role in bridging the justice gap by providing community justice help, and proposes a framework that describes the key elements of good quality community justice help. I have the pleasure of introducing the authors of the report, Julie Mathews and David Wiseman. Julie, since 1999, has served as the executive director of CLEO, a community legal clinic which since 1974 has developed legal rights education and information to help people understand and exercise their legal rights. Their work focuses on providing information to people who face barriers to accessing the justice system, including income, disability, literacy, and language. Julie was the 2018-2019 recipient of the Law Foundation of Ontario's Community Leadership in Justice Fellowship. She was hosted by the University of Ottawa Faculty of Law, Common Law section, where she worked in close partnership with Professor David Wiseman, who has significant research and teaching expertise in the area of community-based legal assistance and access to justice. As I've said, David is an assistant professor in the Faculty of Law at the University of Ottawa. He serves as the Canadian Association of Law Teachers president and has published several articles and book chapters on the legal protection of social and economic human rights. Prior to joining Ottawa's university faculty, David was a senior advisor at the National Judicial Institute. Thank you, David and Julie, for your leadership on this issue, and we look forward to today's session.
Is that my cue, Chloe?
That's your cue.
Thanks very much, Teresa, for that introduction. I'm just going to share my screen for a PowerPoint now. So hopefully that will work out. Go up here to the slideshow. Okay, so hopefully everyone can now see PowerPoint on their screen, which is the PowerPoint that Julie and I are going to speak to. Again, thanks for the introduction, Teresa. It's a pleasure to be here. And we, as Julie said at the outset, we very much want to thank you, the Law Society of Ontario, the Action Group on Access to Justice in Ontario, and the other organizers of Access to Justice Week across the country and in the specific jurisdictions that are primarily taking part in this session. It's wonderful to see so many people here, or at least with us in Zoom land, and we thank you for taking the time to be with us today and to give us your reactions and feedback. Probably the best way for us to thank you is to try to stay on time. So I'm just going to go straight into the presentation now. I'm going to speak for about the first half of our time, and then Julie is going to take over for the second part. So Teresa has already briefly introduced the report, and there are you've been given access to some links with the full report and some summary documents, as well as some supporting blog posts. So that provides much more information than we can provide in today's presentation, as well as some jurisdictional context, which may be of interest to folks. So there is more information available there. So let's just focus in on what we're going to talk about for the next 15 minutes or so. So, as has been mentioned, what our report proposes is that community justice help should be recognised and supported as a means of improving access to justice. What we're going to address in our presentation today specifically are three questions that you might have about that proposal as follows. What is community justice help? Why do we propose a, quote, supporting and equipping approach to it? And what are the specifics of our approach? Okay, so to the first question, what is community justice help? Well, this is generally how we define it for the purposes of our report. Community justice help is the help provided by staff in not-for-profit community-based organizations to people experiencing life-affecting problems with a law-related element. The asterisk there signifies that when we think of staff, we're certainly thinking also about volunteers in those sorts of organizations who are trained and supervised by staff. So that's the basic definition. Let me dig a little bit deeper into the more specific details about what sorts of help we're referring to. And our understanding of this is informed by research commissioned by the Law Foundation of Ontario a few years ago, which many of you may be familiar with, and Julie was one of the co-authors of this report, and I think some other co-authors are in the session today. This is called the Trusted Help Report, and the report shows, one of the things that it shows is that many people in Ontario experiencing problems with a law-related element turn for assistance to someone in their local community they trust, including community workers. The Trusted Help Report highlights the extraordinary efforts taken by these trusted helpers or trusted intermediaries, as it's referred to in the report, or as we would refer to them, community justice helpers. It highlights the extraordinary efforts taken by them to respond to their clients' needs. More specifically than that, this is a chart taken directly from the Trusted Help Report, and it shows in more detail the types of law-related help provided by frontline workers in Ontario based on survey responses from over 200 respondents. And just starting from the top, I'll briefly go through it. Between 80 and 90% of frontline workers help their clients identify legal issues and give basic legal information about legal rights and procedures. Slightly over 90% give referrals to legal service providers. Over 60% help complete legal forms and documentation, and 70% help people to take steps to resolve a legal problem. Significant numbers, though less than half, also accompany clients to meetings with legal professionals or to a tribunal or court hearing. So these are the sorts of more specific help that constitute community justice help. And our report provides some brief case studies of current specific organizations who are involved in this sort of work, mainly in Ontario, but also in British Columbia. And as I mentioned, the blog posts that are supporting this session in different jurisdictions also identify some organizations which are examples of what we would call community justice help providers. Okay, so if that's what community justice help is, then why do we propose an approach recognizing, supporting, and equipping it? Well, the main reason is that community workers provide good quality help. Exactly what we mean by good quality is going to be unpacked more by Julie in her part of the presentation. Okay, but an additional reason is that often, and this is highlighted in the Trusted Help report as well as other reports, community justice help or help from community workers will be the only help that a person can access for a life-affecting problem with a law-related element. The problem, though, is that, as many of you would be aware, this sort of help is perceived to fall on the wrong side of the regulatory dividing line that separates the provision of legal information from the provision of legal services. So as a matter of the regulation of the legal profession and legal services, there is a perception that community justice help falls on the wrong side. In particular, that it can fall into legal services rather than just legal information. I'm not going to go into the details of the dividing line for the purpose of this presentation, but the main point about it is that this dividing line serves to discourage and undermine community justice help, which is a source of good quality, accessible help. The asterisk that we have on perceived here is just a signal that in our report, in fact, we consider the extent to which this perception that community justice help falls on the wrong side of the line is a misperception based upon certain exceptions that exist in Ontario, but we won't go into the details of that for the purposes of today. So this sort of, on the one hand, good quality help that may be all that people can access, but the discouraging or undermining effect of the dividing line led us to consider alternative approach of supporting and equipping. So let me finish my part of the presentation by just briefly explaining how this supporting and equipping approach generally aligns with the objective that underlies also this dividing line approach. So as we understand it, what underlines the dividing line approach is ultimately a concern to protect the public interest. So our goal, and the general goal, is to provide or ensure that people have access to good quality help that is accessible. In our view, as I say, this objective aligns with the concern to protect the public interest that informs regulation of the legal profession and legal services across Canada. One important element of protecting the public interest is to provide some assurance about the good quality of community justice help. In short, quality assurance. And our research showed us that there are a number of reasons to be confident about quality assurance for community justice help. The first reason is that, as research has demonstrated, it's entirely possible for non-lawyers to provide competent and effective help for law-related issues, despite not having formal legal training or licensing. According to the research, the secret to success here is specialization, based on day-to-day experience of serving clients and engaging law-related processes. Of course, this is not to say that there are not contexts where deeper legal expertise based on formal legal training and experience of legal practice is relevant and necessary. It's just to say that that deeper legal expertise is by no means always relevant or necessary. In addition, though, it's important, we think, in this respect, to note that the quality of community justice help is not only about the capacity to provide law-related help, but also the capacity to effectively do so for clients and communities that are living on low income and otherwise experiencing social disadvantage. Community workers have training and experience in how to effectively help in contexts of social disadvantage. This then brings me to some broader reasons to be confident about quality assurance for community justice help. To begin with, there are strong existing quality assurance mechanisms in the not-for-profit sector in general, as we discovered through research and interviews. At the level of individual workers, many are members of regulated professions or occupations, such as registered social workers. And as well, many participate in certification and accreditation programs. So these are some of the reasons we're confident about quality assurance for community justice help. Finally, in addition, of course, protecting the public interest has an ethical dimension as well. And we would note that also in the not-for-profit sector, there is no financial gain from clients in the delivery of community justice help, which we think is another component that helps to protect the public interest. Okay, so that's our proposal in general and some of the reasons that we put it forward. I'll now hand over to Julie to unpack it in a little bit more detail.
So picking up where David left off, I will talk about what we're proposing and give you some details. I think I will move fairly quickly. A lot of the details are set out in those summary documents, particularly the summary framework. So I would refer you to those documents. So getting to the guts of what we propose, we're recommending that community justice help for life-affecting problems that include a law-related element should be supported and assisted rather than discouraged or prohibited. So we are suggesting this sort of equip, not restrict approach should be followed where community workers, where three features are present. So I think we're at the next slide. Yeah, great, thanks. Where they have, so the three features, and we call this our three-featured framework. And so firstly, where they have the knowledge, skills, and experience they need to perform the tasks that they're carrying out in this area. They're working within a not-for-profit organization and an ethical infrastructure, and they're providing support that responds holistically to their clients' needs. So this, as I said, this is what we call our three-featured framework. And here, the next slide has a visual representation of the three features. And we note that these three features are fairly vague, I guess. And so we took some time to spell out some markers or indicators of what might suggest the existence of these three markers. And that's what I'll run through in the next few slides. So on that first feature, feature number one, we identified 6 key markers in this, and undoubtedly there are many more, and I'll mention just a few of them. So firstly, the organizations and its staff are specialists in providing help with these types of problems. They perform the tasks day in and day out, their routine. To support that work, they use and have a comprehensive, up-to-date knowledge base. A key method of having that knowledge base is through regular training, but there are other ways as well. And I think an important aspect of this knowledge base is that they have the knowledge of when a question or task is something that they shouldn't be doing, that they don't know enough, and they know what the red flags are and where they must find other people to provide assistance. And then finally on this slide, the organization and its staff are well supported and connected and receive appropriate oversight. And then on the next slide, the last 2 markers under this feature, firstly, and on a related note to the last few, the organization has relationships with expert legal professionals whom they can call on and as needed. And this is a key one, I think, and one that every organization I spoke with has in place. And typically in Ontario, those lawyers that are called on work in community legal clinics. And then the last marker under this feature, we think that where staff are helping people with forms or other tasks, and they're promoted and expected that people can do them on their own without needing legal assistance from a lawyer or paralegal, this is an indicator that community justice help is appropriate. And then moving more quickly, I think, through the next couple of features. So feature 2 markers, and this feature is the overall goal of this feature is markers that suggest that clients' dignity, privacy, and welfare are being looked after or being protected. So firstly, and we say this time and time again, where an organization operates as a not-for-profit. Secondly, where they have an accountability structure in place. And then next slide, David. 3 more sort of feature 2 markers. The organization has proper policies and practices in place on key ethical issues, for example, on client confidentiality and a code of content. Secondly, the organization has a complaints policy that is acted on. And thirdly, they have the organization has a liability insurance policy in place that compensates clients in the event of negligence. So the third feature, we note 3 markers, or we list 3 markers, which relate, and these all relate to the provision of holistic support by community workers. And by holistic support, we mean several things, but it includes an awareness of the multidimensional nature of people's problems, of their community's problems, the social context of their lives, the levels and types of specialization or expertise needed, the availability of timely joined up services, the extent of barriers to accessing services in the community, and the availability of longer term support from the organization or others. So the next slide, I think, please. So the support, and finally, these are the last 2 markers under feature 3, and that's that the community justice help supports needs that are frequently undermet or unmet or underserved by licensed legal professionals that are accessible in the community. And this is important because we are not suggesting that workers providing community justice help can or should replace lawyers or paralegals. Indeed, we think that experienced lawyers and paralegals and those who work in the community legal clinic system in Ontario, for example, provide a critically needed expert service. So to that point, and to the importance of supporting people to get the best possible help, another indicator is whether the organization offers holistic support that joins up with and supports good quality services from local licensed legal services providers where they're available and accessible. So to our overarching recommendations, and then I want to wrap up. We make 3 overarching recommendations and several more specific ones at the end of the report. And generally, we recommend that community justice help should be recognized as a type of service that advances access to justice, and that it is an important component of the broader ecosystem of access to justice services. We also spend some time in the report discussing the ecosystem and how important that the ecosystem include a well-resourced legal aid system, which in Ontario, as I've said, includes community-based legal clinics. Our second recommendation is that Ontario's regulator recognize and confirm that community justice help is permitted under its rules. And I note here with appreciation that the LSO is indeed supporting this session and these discussions today. And that's pretty great given this recommendation, and that they will be hosting additional discussions. So finally, but importantly, we recommend that community organizations should be supported in developing tools and resources, working in partnership with legal organizations. So the next slide I'm going to put up there, but I'm not going to say too much about it. It's some next steps that could be taken. David and I are working on a sort of follow-up literature review funded by the Department of Justice Canada that explored some of the issues more deeply. It will be due by hell or high water. It will be done by early 2021. And then I had listed some other things, some other possible next steps that we hope others may engage in. So we now must turn it over to the breakout rooms, because that's sort of the key part of this 1-hour session is for people to discuss, get feedback, share ideas about this framework. So we will be dividing, and Chloe, you will correct me if I screw up, we will be dividing all participants into breakout rooms for smaller group discussions. And each room will have a moderator and a note taker. 6 discussion questions will be provided, and you can also refer to the material shared in the Zoom chat as they will inform your discussion. And then all participants will be pushed. So now all participants will be pushed into the breakout rooms. And then after about a 22-minute discussion, we'll come back to hear a quick highlight from each group. So we'll reconvene just for about 5 minutes or so. Right, Chloe?
That's correct. Thank you, Julie. So I'm going to open those rooms now, and we look forward to the conversation that ensues.
This is cool.
So it looks like everyone is back now. Julia sent through a list of the groups associated with the moderators as well. So we may want to call on them for a quick 30-second review of the key messages. Does that sound good to you, Julie? And David? Of course. Perfect. So we've got Patricia, Drew, and David. I don't know who out of you wants to provide a 30-second snapshot of your group out in BC, please and thanks.
Yeah, I'll provide some key takeaways that our group had. We dealt with the first 2 questions because we had spirited discussions and we didn't progress beyond them. But the first comment was having to do with the anything missing question. Do you think there's anything missing from the approach, community justice approach? And the suggestion was made that perhaps more attention be given to client journeys. In other words, and that what the client does what a person does when they are seeking legal information and legal help. And David popped in to offer some suggestions of where that information could be found. It was also thought that it would be great if this type of information were read by others than those who are perhaps here in our discussion group. By that I mean lawyers in private practice, as an example, maybe judges too, so that they'd have a greater understanding of the context of for people who are in the various ways they look for legal help. They don't, and we all know that, do they? Second slide had to do with the markers of quality, good quality community justice help. And I think the group largely endorsed the markers that existed, that were put forward, by the paper. And there were a few additions that were suggested, and maybe markers that related to Aboriginal clients and markers relating to trauma-informed help. So that is pretty much what we talked about.
Excellent, thank you. I'll turn it over to Jess, who is overseeing another Ontario group, please and thanks.
Absolutely, thanks. Well, we really tackled one question, so we probably could have had more time, but we took the third question actually. So we looked at the challenges, and in the discussions, we talked about how it's a little bit difficult to think about the framework in the abstract. So some of the members really drew on their personal experiences in working in this field in order to raise some of these issues. So one of the things that came up was about how many of these supporting organizations and nonprofits, they're often in precarious situations themselves. And, you know, funding is always an issue for not-for-profits. And we talked a little bit about some of the challenges that these not-for-profits face with either insecure funding, but oftentimes staff turnover as well too. So it can be a bit of a challenge sometimes when it comes to thinking about applying this generally, given the reality that many not-for-profits work in. And then we also turned our mind a little bit to thinking about what happens, or putting the question out there, what happens if markers aren't met? A couple of folks in our group did raise the issue that while not-for-profit organizations, while we mentioned the not-for-profit organizations aren't motivated by financial interests, there are other interests that are that can be quite serious for them, whether it is, you know, finding funders, and so they might be motivated by other things that that we traditionally wouldn't think of as when we're thinking about for-profits.
So Chloe, these are so interesting. I have to ask, because I'm aware of the cutoff time, people maybe keep it to 30 seconds or just something to add on to what others have already said.
Perfect. Maybe I'll turn it over to Saskatchewan Bree for that perspective there, please.
Sure, just quickly, we had such a great discussion. I really enjoyed it. We spoke about the need for some kind of education course that isn't a barrier, that's reciprocal in nature, that, you know, just as folks are learning from on the ground community workers and vice versa. We also talked about the last question of models in other fields. We talked about pharmacists and how they've just gotten more responsibility in, you know, the last years, and how that's kind of an interesting parallel if we're looking at community workers, and just that putting more trust into folks that know their communities best. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Brilliant. And maybe if I can call on Alana out in Nova Scotia as well, please and thanks.
Hi, this is great. We got a real cross-jurisdictional analysis, which was fabulous. So one of the things we were talking about, and yeah, it does kind of bear upon what resources you have in your province. So, you know, for example, from Newfoundland, like one of the things that we were talking about was maybe better coordination of our community justice help. We don't tend to have a central place in Atlantic Canada, in our respective provinces, where we can understand, you know, what community justice workers are out there, what kind of work they're doing, and you know, if you are someone like a public librarian or a law librarian, you know, going to that central repository and understanding where to help, where to send people would really help. We raised some concerns about regulation. You know, lawyers are regulated, and so we know that there is security for the public in that, but with community justice workers, we were unsure how that would be carried out. There was some concern too that, like, the conversation over community justice workers doesn't serve to undermine arguments in favor of funding community legal aid clinics, for example, in Ontario, where they do great work. We don't have those in Atlantic Canada, but they would be great too. So, and as well, perhaps bringing in law clerks and legal assistants into the discussion. So in Ontario, there's a system of law clerks, and really bringing them into this discussion and engaging them, especially perhaps even the next A2J week. Thank you so much.
So Chloe, can we have one more? I know that we're tight for 1:30, a strict cutoff time.
Sure, that sounds great. Hugh, if we can hear from your group, please, number 6.
We didn't have a lot of time to get beyond one question, which was really number 3, I believe, talking about training. And just like real estate, training. A lot of emphasis on that, the importance of it, recognizing legal issues that arise, the role of legal professionals, and how and when to refer appropriately, and the feeling that there's a real role for community legal clinics in the training process because of our relationship with many of the community organizations already established, and a recognition of a need particularly for Indigenous agencies. Thank you.
So Chloe, do we have time for that last slide and thank yous, or better not?
Over to you, Julie. Yeah, I think you can do it quickly. Thank you.
Okay, so the last slide, and I'll just say, just lists, engage and participate. So I don't know if the slide deck is going to be up on the tag site, but if it is, you can look at these links there, sort of how to continue to engage and participate. I did want to say thank you so much to a few people, the Law Society and TAG for hosting this, and BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan Access to Justice Committees for sponsoring it, to Chloe, to the moderators, to the note takers, to the Law Foundation for funding, and to everyone who came today with their interest and ideas, and we'd love to hear more from you. So thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, everyone.